Igls in Austria on a beautiful sunny Saturday morning. It's a perfect location for all sorts of alpine activities. And high in the Tyrol we find a double Olympic venue. This Igls village has twice held the sliding sports for Olympics in 1964 and 1976. And today it's the venue for round 8 of the 2man FIBT 2man Bobsleigh World Cup. And it is also the European Championships race. Well, sitting alongside me is Canadian brakeman Jesse Lumsden. Jesse, your job on this track perhaps more important than almost anywhere else in the business.
Talking to the other athletes, they all agree the start matters here. It is a longer start with a very, very gradual decline as you come out of the grooves. It is important not only to have a good start, as you can see the start record is 4:96 held by Malbardis and Dreiskens, but the velocity is key. You need speed. It is a very flat top part of the track. You don't want to have waves in these top corners because you're making it longer for you to get down, and you cannot have hits, you cannot have taps. It's just going to slow you down. It's going to scrub speed all the way. The drivers will say quite often here that you have to look long and let it run. It's easy to get down this track, but very difficult to be fast. As we come into Kreisel, you see the blue markings on the wall. This gives them an idea of height. Coming out of here, you need to be straight. Skids there will kill your time. And coming out of 9, we also have a long straightaway. Skidding here will kill your time. Coming down into 10, you can see the markings on the wall and into the labyrinth. This is very, very similar to Calgary's track. You have a labyrinth and then a big finish corner. If you screw up 11 in the labyrinth, again, it's going to screw up time, and the finish corner coming through 14. And the scariest part of the track is this little kink here. You need to make sure, as a brakeman, you hit the brakes hard, slow the sled down. You are known to crash there sometimes. Yeah, well, right from the start, you've got to get the speed in, and vitally, the brakeman on the back, right at the finish, you've got to be very sharp at getting those brakes on, as you say. Not a lot of room to play with. Well, the man who you pushed to the gold medal this season already is Lyndon Rush. He is our World Cup points leader. Manuel Maharch of Germany lies second. Last year's 2man and 4man world champion Steve Holcomb in 3rd position. This is the 8th of 9 races, but the next won't come for a month in Sochi, Russia. It's also the Olympic tryout event. And Jesse, everybody is looking forward to go to that, to just discover what this new track holds. And that's going to be a big adventure for everyone. It'll be my first time experiencing a new track along with a lot of other people's. We had the opportunity to have one of our athletes last year homologate the track, Jenny Cacchetti, and she said the experience was very exciting, but I can speak on behalf of the rest of the athletes. It's going to be a neat experience. It's 2 weeks, the first week being a test, not a testing week, but a training week. So it's going to be a little lighter. It's going to be, you're going to have some fun, and very similar conditions as to what we see in a team race. Everybody will be mingling and talking, and at the same time, you got 2 weeks to figure this track out before a training week at the beginning of next year's season.
Yeah. Well, the air temperature here hovering just around freezing. That's a full 8 degrees warmer than it was at 7 o'clock this morning when we rocked up to the track. Ice temperature -4, -5, and it'll hover around that. In fact, for the first time this week, they even whisper it, a little bit of sunshine. Look, not only can we see there are mountains, but there's some light reflected off the snow there on the far side of the valley in the Tyrol region. Oskars Malbardis, the track record holder at the start, is our first man off the ice here. Steve Holcomb, Alexander Zubkov, Lyndon Rush, all right up behind him in that top 10 random start draw. We have a decent-sized field of 30 sleds here, and that means that 2 out of 3 will go through, but it means that 10 will be merely interested spectators for the final run. And among the 30 sleds, a brand new World Cup debutant, Drazen Silic of Croatia, makes his first ever World Cup start. 30 sleds, and in front of them 1,200 and odd meters of ice at this Innsbruck Igls track high in the Austrian Tyrol region. And we are ready for the start of race 8 in the 2man FIBT 2man Bobsleigh World Cup. Also counts as the European Championship for 2012-13 season. First sled on the ice is Latvia 1, Oskars Malbardis and Daumans Dreiskens. Both former brakemen. In 2010, they braked for Jānis Minins in the Latvian sled and the Olympic Games. And then Oskars Malbardis started to learn to drive. Martin Haven and Canadian brakeman Jesse Lumsden alongside, and whatever else about Malbardis, he ain't got any slower since the Games.
That is for sure. These are the fastest starting two-man team on the circuit. And you can see the legs chugging from both athletes.
4:96 is the start record. 5:01, just 0.05 of a second away from their all-time start record. That was set in this race in December 2011.
We didn't see a start record in the women's race either. The guys could be a little bit slower coming into this race this year.
51 kilometers now is great velocity through the first corner. 88.8 as well, that's very quick. Nice smooth lines from Melbardis.
Nice and smooth out of Kreisel and through Kreisel.
Great line from 7 into 8, sets him up for 9.
Important straightaway, very important straightaway.
The steer a little there as he gets into 10.
This is a track for him because the start is so important, and because he does start so fast ahead of the rest of the field. He is a favorite for this race.
Okay, so a 52.57 slide for Oskars Melbardis. Damas Driskin sitting up tall as he really hauls the brake handles hard there coming into the finish area.
Well, the pace has been set, the tone has been set. It'll be interesting, especially with this next sled coming up. As we can see here, a nice early entrance and coming out. Runners pointing forward, but he lost the back end just a little bit, and you have a little bit of a touch. You want to be perfect on this track. It's very, very hard to be very fast. Nice height coming into 10. And coming out of 11. Keeps it nice and straight. Good speed. But the next sled up here is USA 1. They are driving a new sled for the first time, made by BMW.
Okay, so this is Stephen Holcomb and Kurt Tomasevich, who called the women's race with me yesterday. Very distinctive look to the front of the cowl of this brand new sled, and it's all straight into the wall for the first time out.
The same thing happened to Lyndon and I last year. If you push it a little too far, if you try to force that start time, force that velocity, and have a bit of a sideways load out of the grooves, you have no pressure on the sled. That's going to send you into the short wall.
You can just hear how much contact this sled is having with the wall.
As the sled left the screen out of Kreisel, you did see the back end lose a little bit. Correction, and keeps it straight going into 10, 102.1 kilometers an hour.
Well, that's quicker than the Latvian sled. Despite that, and that is quicker than the Latvian sled as well. Well, Melbardis was keeping the line neat, but maybe he was steering too much to do it. 53.09. Holcomb comes down half a second back, and after that, driving straight into the wall, basically stopping the sled almost dead. That's not a surprise, but the speed at the bottom was very good.
Very good, but we talked about this is a track that you need to have the velocity. If you don't have the velocity at the top, it's going to be very, very difficult to be fast at the bottom. It's not a long track, it's short, and it's difficult to play catch-up, even though he did have good speed. Here we go, we're taking a look at the start again. Holcomb seems to load okay, and so does Tomasevich, but it is borderline.
Now, Holke doesn't get in first time of asking us. He's trying to get into the seat, can't get in, then he drops in. But that, I don't know, 0.2 of a second, quarter of a second, that's enough to not have his hands on the steering when he needs it.
Especially when it's a new system inside that sled. You don't know where he's reaching, trying to grab for.
Well, next up is Alexander Zubkov. Had a big race here in 2011, but disappointing finish, down in only 9th place. Russian has been strong in 4-man this year, 2man medals.
5:12 start. Dimitri the brakeman has raced every race. He could be getting a little bit of fatigue set in this coming into the World Championships.
Good momentum, 50.8 kilometers an hour, full K and a half up on Holcomb. And that's the result of not hitting that wall. But the start is so important here, Jesse Lumsden. 1600s back, 1500s back now from Melbardis. Can he find anything at the bottom that Melbardis couldn't?
Very smooth out of Kreisel. He's going to need. This is where the sled gets fast. This is where he needs to be perfect. 102.1 kilometers an hour.
Same speed as Holcomb, but he's closing on Melbardis. This to take the lead. 123 dead. Is there going to be another corner? Can he find it in 14? No, he can't. Not quite. 52.63 slide.
He was able to come back from quite a large deficit, and that's the biggest difference between a pilot like Zubkov and a pilot like Malbardis. Malbardis has been driving for 4 or 5 years now, and Zubkov has triple that on his experience. It really is experience, and especially at a track like this where you have to do very, very little to be fast. Nice and smooth lines, runners pointing forward. You don't see the runners moving a lot, and what I mean by runners, the steering, all the steering happens in the front too, and you can see the speed here. He has the second fastest speed, 123.0 kilometers an hour.
When Zubkov started driving, Oskars Malbardis, the race leader, was just 8 years old. And that's when he started in bobsleigh, Alexander Zubkov. He was a successful luger first. Well, next up, Lyndon Rush with Lascelles Brown on the back of the Canada 1 sled. And in a long campaign, and especially with 2 weeks of World Championships before the Olympic test event, it's important to circulate your brakemen around and keep bodies recovering and healthy.
And that's what Lascelles and I have been doing all season long. We've been sharing the role of the duty as the two-man brakeman, and it's allowed us to keep fresh. You'll see that the start times have diminished for Zubkov over the season. Lyndon finished 6th here last year. We had a bit of an issue in the second run hitting out of the start grooves like Holcomb did, and it put us in a tough situation. But a nice exit out of Kreisel. We're going to take a look at the speed here in a second.
Well, needs to be up to 102. I think he's going to be very close. 102.4, fastest we've seen. Still behind. 1400s down to 9. 123.8, that's flying. Here he comes for the lead. Lyndon Rush of Canada. Final corner will do it by a few hundreds. No! Wow. A little chuckle from Graham Richardson there. But doesn't quite get in. 300ths of a second. And we saw some massive margins at the front of the men's skeleton field. The bobsleigh field is exactly what we expect at Igls. Tiny, tiny gaps.
Very tight. And we'll notice the difference come with the less experienced drivers. We take a look at the start here. Looks like it comes out nice and straight, nice and clean. And you can see both athletes digging hard from behind. And as we take a look at the load, Lyndon is very dynamic, very Superman-esque as he comes over the cowling, and Lascelles does a good job of getting in smoothly. He's had some trouble with that this year, coming in a little sideways, a little crooked, but he comes in nice and calm, nice and smooth, allows that sled to go straight, and you can see coming into the corner there, a good steer, keeping it, and saying obviously the hello to mom and dad back at home.
Absolutely right. Next up, Germany's Manuel Mahata. First time, I think, in a two-man start for Alex Mann this season. He's been a reliable part of a number of four-man crews.
Well, another very smooth load, 528. Mahata hasn't had the best starts this season. Alex Mann is a veteran. I mean, we saw him pull a miraculous move and getting Hubenbaker into the sled a few races back, but he's looking for someone. He's looking for someone to take the lead who can give him the start he needs to help him. He's an excellent driver. They have an excellent equipment setup.
Well, you know, there is a definite start deficit with Germany, and it seems a surprise to me, Jesse, that still exists.
He's putting together a great run, though, and we're seeing that you have to be perfect, taking a small tap, 102.1 kilometers an hour.
Well, you know, he's down at the start, and no matter how well he drives, there's just not very much ice. The speeds are as good as anyone else, and as a result, he limits the damage. 2,700s behind at the start, and he's 4,100s back at the finish.
That's a funny thing about this track. You need that start, or you're not going to stand a chance. And that was a good run with good speeds, and if there was about 4 or 5 more corners, he may have had a shot to shorten that margin up, but it's just the Igls track is a funny track like that.
Big haul off the blocks from Alex Mann.
A big slip out of Mahata there, and that's, I mean, when we're dealing with hundreds and thousands of a second, if you're slipping in the first 3 steps, you're not contributing to the power. Now here we have the Kreisel corner. As you can see these blue marks, he has nice height going through. It's very, very smooth, and coming through the exit of Kreisel, he's going to start steering it out and get that nose down and really use that centrifugal force to push that sled down and out and create speed. It's like a slingshot. It's like firing out of a slingshot.
Corey Butner of the USA, Californian high school basketball player, 30 years old now, and enjoying his first season here in Europe. Brakeman on the back of the USA 2 sled is Andreas Drabel.
who's a phenomenal piano player.
Yeah.
A phenomenal piano player. Just throwing that out there. 5:26 getaway.
Well, if we'd ever spent any time in our hotel bar and weren't working hard, I'm sure we would have heard him tinkling on the ivories. But,
well, I think every Canadian and every American who hasn't heard him play is looking forward to staying at the Latinella in St. Moritz next 2 weeks, because there is a piano in the bar there, and he will be playing. 89.1 kilometers an hour coming through Kreisel.
Again, really nice looking run from Corey Butner. Let's see what the Bodine sled comes for up in speed numbers. We're looking into the 102s, 102.7, fastest sled of all so far.
124.7.
Wow, and again, really clicking up those high numbers. 1500s off the lead in 4th place, and that is a really good run from Corey Butner. Wow. That may be the smoothest trip he's had in Europe, I think.
No, he had put together a very nice run there. A couple little mistakes, but with the equipment setup that he chose today, it's running well, it's flying, and you saw it in the speed. And we got to take a look from the back here again from the start. That first 2 steps is very, very important to get that momentum going before that clock starts at that 50 meters. And you see the legs digging. A little bit of a skid coming out of corner, I think that was 6.
Yeah. Again, tiny little taps on the wall, and you know, all of those probably add up to 1/10 of a second, which shows how close he was.
He cleans up those small little mistakes. He could find himself in a very good position for the second heat.
Germany's Thomas Florschut started his season last year with silver medal here, went on to 3 consecutive 2-man wins. Can he reignite that sort of form here in Germany 1? He's got the beast that is Kevin Kuska behind him, who I never ceases to surprise me how he ever gets in a sled.
Well, the guy's a monster. You could be playing for DN for the New England Patriots. He has the size and the speed. The sled did pop out of the grooves a little bit. He was able to get it back in quickly, and you know, there is the debate, does that scrub time?
Well, empirically, if the sled is going up or sideways, it's not going forward to maximum efficiency, but he's got a lead over Oskars Melbardis.
It's the first lead we've seen in 7 sleds, and he's
started very close to Melbardis, and he continues to accelerate away a little quicker than the Latvian. In fact, a full ½ kilometer quicker than the Latvian.
124 kilometers an hour is not the fastest we have seen, but it's good enough to separate that margin with a good drive.
Wow, 1600ths of a second. Christoph Langen loving that one, the coach, and the all-time record holder here with Marcus Zimmermann. The track record they set back in 1999.
Well, 09, like we said, we come back. You're going to hear a lot of this today, folks. It's all about the start, and it's the second fastest start we've seen today. The sled does pop out of the grooves a little bit. Kevin does a good job of getting it back in. You can see the big man working back there. You can see the strength he has. He's bending the cowling when he's pushing. It may not be the best energy use, but when you have a man who's 6'5", and I'm going to speak in pounds here, I'm going to guess around 250, 260 pounds, and who can move that quick, that's what you want in bobsleigh, because once he gets in, that weight is pushing that speed. As you can see, the second fastest speed here, 124 kilometers an hour just before the labyrinth.
The FES sled starting to really work at top speed, which they didn't a couple of seasons ago. Simone Battato of Italy's got Francesco Costa behind him on the Italy 1 sled. Battato, 30-year-old Carabinieri. 2 2-man career wins at Lake Placid and at the, well, currently closed Torino track.
5:20 start. Not the best, but he has the ability to maneuver the sled. He does have good speeds at most of the tracks he goes to. So again, it'll be a question of whether or not he can catch up, but whether he can stop the bleeding.
1100s back at the start, and of course it's not just how they're not sprinting as quick, but there's not as much energy going into the sled. 3/10 down already.
Nice high line in Kreisel, important exit. Keeps it straight, right down the middle.
And that may have helped him to stop bleeding time. Another good exit, 9 to 10. 102.4 is decent speed.
Coming into the labyrinth, this is very important.
Quicker than Florschut's at the bottom, so he will close that gap down a little. So 3300s now. He was 3300s behind at this Kreisel, halfway down the track. And once he'd undone the start damage, then he didn't lose an inch to our race leader. And again, you know, Jesse, that just underlines, especially here, how much a part of this sport the start is.
And you can't overlook it. You absolutely cannot overlook it. And when you have guys like Oscars and DeMonts, who are former brakemen and working together, this is the track for them. If you take a look at Kreisel here, he has a nice high line, smooth, really feeling the pressure, and he's going to use that slingshot effect to come out of it.
Good exit out of 11 into the labyrinth. Little skid there, perhaps. But all in all, the start was definitely the weakest part of that run.
Well, speaking of starts...
Yeah, Beat Hefty and Thomas Lamparter. And these two were brakemen for Martin Annan 6, 7, 8 years ago, and have grown together into one of the best starting crews on the planet.
Well, keep an eye on where they load. It is very important that you do not try to push it too far. You can't run too far or you're going to have the same incidents, and it looked like they were smart, and he was in early, and they're going to take a good velocity with a 5:06 start.
Let's see the numbers in the first corner. Fastest velocity we've had is 51.1 from Florschutz and from Melbardis, and they are right there.
Well, even though he's starting a bit further back, he won here last year. He has the ability to start very, very quick, as we just saw. Another favorite. He should be on the podium. I don't want to speak too soon, as we only have 1/100 of a second of a lead coming into Kreisel, but...
Top speed, no one quicker there at the Kreisel. Top speed now is 1:02.7. He hits a wall 2 or 3 times in a long skid. Still got better speed in the City of Sled. It really flew yesterday in the hands of the Swiss women. 1:23.4. That big skid took a full kilometre an hour out of his top speed, and he still holds on to take the lead. Wow. Well, that was a big run from Beat Hefty.
Well, if we can take a look at that skid again in the replay, we'll be able to see how much that actually did scrub his time up. He would have been up 1300s at least if he did not have those taps and skids. He had pressure late on the corner, and it caused for a messy straightaway. But a veteran pilot now, and he's able to hold on to the lead.
Found speed at the bottom, but big height. Didn't quite carry the exit. It looked like he
tried
hit
to come
the
out.
wall
He tried to bring the sled out too early. He didn't follow the round, and that's what caused the pressure back into the wall and the ping pong effect there.
Well, it was the reverse angle shows no contact, but it certainly slowed him a little. Francesco Friedrich, the 2-man junior world champion. On the back of his sled is Janis Becker. And Francesco, 2- and 4-man world champion from the Altenburg track in Saxony.
Francesco is the fastest starting pilot in the German team. A good start, 5:08, 200s behind the lead right now.
You know, if you put Kevin Kuska behind him, they would be down in the 4.9 somewhere, challenging Melbardis.
They'd be very quick, quick start.
Which is no disrespect to Janis Becker, but Kuska is absolutely Germany's #1 pushing brakeman.
Hands down. That being said, Thomas Florschutz is the #1 pilot, so that's how that pairing works.
Exactly right. Well, 200s behind at the start, just 700s back. Good run down the straightaway.
Same mistake as Hefty there. He came out too early, pressure late, the pressure brought him back into the short wall. And we have slow speeds again, 123.7 kilometers exiting the labyrinth and into the finish corner.
123.7, third fastest, but a full kilometre an hour slower than Corey Butner. Nevertheless, 52.44 slide. Well, again, Jesse Lumsden, we are a very, very tight field. He's just 600s back. He's in 3rd place. And then from 4th place to Oscars Melbardis, another couple of tenths of a second covering the rest of the field.
Well, it is amazing how one mistake can change so much. You don't usually see that on other tracks, and we see here the sled gets height early, but it looks like he's just bringing it down too soon. And what that does, as we see, it brings it back into the short wall. We have a ping pong effect, a little bit of a skid, and that kills the speed at the bottom. Here's the exit of 9, and it just comes right back into us.
Well, by that part on the track, you should hopefully be ready for how the steering will respond on this very different race day ice to how it was in training. Next up, Canada 2. Chris Springs got Neville Wright on the back handles of the sled. The former Aussie slider. Now Sliding for Canada in his second year on the World Cup.
A little bit of a lift out of the grooves by Neville, but is able to keep it in the grooves without coming out, without sliding, without scrubbing speed. Talking to Chris Spring earlier today at breakfast, being my teammate at all, I asked him what are the keys to success on this track, and he said magic. And it's all in the smile. And he was smiling a lot today, so I'm expecting some big things from Mr. Spring.
Let's see what he can produce. 7th place, slips a fraction to 8th at the moment. Good top 10 run would certainly help him here.
He did have a 5:17 get-off, so it isn't the fastest of the field, but again, he's got to be able to stop the bleeding. Saw the correction in the runners there, trying to keep that sled straight.
Long skid, though, and that is going to punish him. 1:23.5, still good speed at the bottom. Everybody's so similar. 52.91, he is in the top 10.
Moving up a couple positions right now. There's a couple, he made 2 or 3 mistakes in that run, whereas opposed to Francesco Fredericks made 1. And it's amazing how much that difference made. So if Chris can clean up a couple of those mistakes, minimize those into the second run, he will move up. As we can see here, Neville has a rest in peace. He lost a friend last week, so he's dedicating the rest of this season to him, and in a very honorable fashion. And you know, he's a strong-charactered man, and he carries that with a heavy heart.
Well, Chris Spring and Neville, yeah, just again that little skid, and the tap there sends the tail out, and yeah, unfortunately there it's all too late to save it.
Well, when you saw the runner tips there, they did a quick back and forth, and that is the pilot trying to correct the straightaway, trying to create a little bit pressure and stickiness to the ice so you don't lose that back end. Unfortunately, a little too late.
John Jackson of Great Britain, 10th of our starters in the top 10 in the World Cup rankings. He's 12th sled on the ice with Craig Pickering behind him. Craig, a 100-metre sprinter and one of Britain's top track and field athletes. This is his second week on tour, so really still trying to learn hard. RAF bobsleigh coach Mark Silver, Mr. Potato Head, is here as well, watching how things go. And again, you know, it's when you see the best doing anything, Jesse Lumsden, it looks very straightforward. But I always say, sprinting head first on ice, over speed, and then leaping into the bobsleigh, it's not the work of you know, a moment's practice. It takes time to learn it.
It is a learned skill, and you see the experience of those in front of him. Zubkov, you know, Rush now, and Manuel Mojado's been driving for a long time. Thomas Forshoots. It's all about experience.
You know, we've got a couple of ex-track and field athletes. We've got Jana Pittman with the Aussies and Craig here with the Brits, beating themselves up because they are making mistakes. Well, you know, they come from elite level down to rookie level, and that's very tough because your aspirations are so high, and he will be absolutely distraught that he didn't get a good load there. Now he's got to get on the brakes nice and hard to stop the sled running out of snow and up onto the rough surface beyond.
Well, you can see that the outrun does go quite vertical quite quickly after that, in case something happens to the brakeman or the brakes in that situation.
Not a bad run from Jacko at the start. Little disappointing 5:31, not a comfortable load. Left him with a lot to do here.
As we come through the exit of the labyrinth, it was fairly smooth. There was a little bit of movement. There was a little too much steering, and you need to have those smooth lines. You need to let it run free so it has that speed. 122 is not fast enough.
12 of our 30 sleds have gone down. Next up is the USA's Nick Cunningham with Dallas Robinson behind him. Cunningham from Monterey, California, a school surfer turned bull rider in college. And so his third choice of just slightly left field sports, of course, is bobsleigh.
5:18 start, kind of middle of the pack right now. He does want to get into bronco riding as well. I know he's a bit of a thrill seeker and a real good guy to talk to, and you know, has that cowboy in him.
Yeah, when he was a kid, he decided he wanted to become a cowboy, and he went out and became a cowboy. Carries it really well. This is a good-looking slide as well. They had a good start. Drifting away a little at the top of the track.
Small tap, 102 kilometers an hour. 123.4. It's not in that 124. You know, it is in the top compared to the top 5 speeds, that's for sure, as he comes to the finish line.
52.91 again in the top 10. Yeah, every time you put yourself in those top 10 positions and you add to your experience, add to your points, add to your ranking, and you move higher up the order, get better start positions. Well, he's tied with Chris Spring of Canada, ahead of Manuel Mahata, Steve Holcomb.
Well, you heard the 18 comment. I think he's a little surprised with the start. Dallas is a very, very fast athlete. And as we see coming out of here, we're going to see this small little tap. That's not going to kill your speed like a skid will. If you skid, you're plowing snow, and that's going to slow you down much more than a tap will ever do. But with Dallas on the back of his sleds, he's expecting to have some very, very fast times. He's a very big athlete, and he's a very, very fast athlete. He did have a, I'm not sure, was that a cell phone that he was pulling out right there? Was that in his speed suit?
Oh, who knows? Could be tweeting on his way down, maybe. Alexander Kasyanov and Max Palugin next up for Russia. Kasyanov in the Russia 2 spots this week. And returning to World Cup action, the Russians with 3 or 4 World Cup sliders. Alexei Stulnev, Dmitry Abramovich, also of Racing World Cup this year. Alexander Zubkov has been the one constant in the team.
Well, being the host nation, you're going to see people, equipment, coaches, film crews out of the woodwork, and it's going to happen for the next 2 years. And I came in late in 2009, 2010 season, so this is my first quadrennial, but I'm starting to see how the trend follows with the funding, and they really want to put an emphasis on those home field wins.
Yeah. Of course, the more you throw at the wall, the more sticks. 101.9 is not bad speed at all from Alexander Kasyanov. 123.0, that's at the bottom of the speed pile. Okay, not sure he got the best out of his singer there.
Stopping it a little short.
Yeah, means more pushing.
More pushing for the brakeman.
Or you're going to have to hump it over the wall, and nobody wants to be doing that.
A little lift on the back, and you saw the hands come completely off the handles. You want to try to keep constant pressure on that sled, moving it forward. As soon as you remove your hands, immediately you lose pressure, you lose force. But a fairly tidy load. Pilot did get his foot caught up. And the exit of Kreisel. Hangs on to that last little hump a little late and keeps him on the right side going down into 8-9.
Well, next up, Alexei Stulnev with Alexei Pushkarev behind him. And Stulnev, just his 3rd ever World Cup start. His wife is sliding in the Russian women's team as well. So very much the family business. Stulnev, just 25 years old from Pavlovsk. He's been fast-tracked in this program. They clearly feel that he's got the potential, maybe even as soon as next year, to really be a star for the Russians.
100th off their teammates, Alexei, at the start.
Same first corner momentum as well. 50 kilometers an hour, the fastest there, doing 51.1.
Tidy run thus far, 88 kilometers an hour, coming into Kreisel, looking for a clean exit. Important straight, we saw the correction there coming out of the corner, and it kept him straight. It was a good correction.
Now he's not even made it to 123 kilometers an hour. That shows that he's working far too hard on the track to keep the lines the way he wants. That's an unusual Pierre Ludus expression, not one of unmitigated delight, I'm suggesting.
Well, it could have been a combination of driving a little too much where he shouldn't have been, and possibly the wrong runner selection. And when I talk about runner selection, it's very, very similar to race car driving. Teams have different sets of runners. The steel, it's a good shot of the steel there, and a good shot of the spikes just tearing up the ice as they're coming through the start. But different steel for different conditions, different tracks. You just may have had the all-weather tires on when he should have had the slicks on, perhaps.
Yeah.
Real big height coming through that Kreisel corner there. Higher than what we've seen of some of the other pilots. And when you go higher, you're creating more space. You're creating a longer track for yourself.
Well, next up is Canada 3. Justin Cripps has got Sam Giguère on the back of the sled. So you got a Hawaiian and a French-Canadian Quebecois. So, I beg your pardon,
Expect a
Hawaii.
very fast start. Well, 5:16. I did expect a faster start out of these two. Cripps just did come back from Koenigsegg for a Europa Cup race where he placed second and got a silver medal. Came back last night and prepared for the World Cup, trying to get some more of those points. Sam on the back of this sled is a very, very new athlete. He's a professional football player as well. Plays for my former team, the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Spent some time in the NFL, but does not have the skill set yet on running behind the sled, on aim behind the sled. And a big tap there, creating a skid, which is going to slow him down. A tidy straightaway with a small tap with 101.6 kilometers an hour.
This is Justin's first season in Europe, so to all effects, you know, he turns up at a track, it's all brand new, clean sheet of paper stuff. So lots of learning, but a good run, 52.92 to put himself in 11th. That's going to guarantee him a second heat without any problems at all.
Well, he's not going to be happy about that push, and you know, it's the growing pains with working with a rookie brakeman. Sam has the potential to be a very, very fast push athlete. As we take a look in the Kreisel here, coming through the exit, he just stays on that round a little too long and gets his nose pushed away from the short wall.
You know, these tracks, organic things, Jesse, they change year on year. In the exit of the Kreisel particularly, there's a little bit of a hammer. The wall is built out. If you catch it, it really slows you down.
And that is exactly the coach's reaction. It's something, again, like Chris Spring, there's a few mistakes. If he corrects a few of those mistakes, he will be in the mix between the top 10 and the top 6, and hopefully with a faster push start.
We are fast filling our 20 available spots in Heat 2. From our 30 sleds, a third of the field will be cut to go into the second race. This is Rico Peter of Switzerland with Seaman Friedli behind him. 34-year-old, beg your pardon, 29-year-old Rico Peter, the younger of the two Swiss athletes.
5:25 start, clean out the gate. You didn't see any lateral movement, you didn't see any lift, you didn't see any runners come out of the grooves. This is Justin Cripps' main competition, and vice versa, Rico Peters' main competition, to keep that third sled on the World Cup team. There's 4 nations allotted to allowed to have 3 teams, and those 2 are vying for those positions. A little low in Kreisel, lower than we've seen a couple of the other sleds, but putting together a fairly tidy run.
Well, at the moment, he is behind Justin Cripps on time and stays behind the Canadian sled. He's not got the speed here either. 123.4 is decent at the bottom, but not exactly earth-shattering, and it is 14th place at the line. So Rico Peter looks pretty much like he will make the second heat as well. And he comes in 400s behind Manuel Mahata. Now, on most tracks in anywhere, that would put you kind of in the top 6.
Yeah.
Not
Igls.
in 14th.
Who knows what's happening in Igls?
Well, Steve Holcomb knows what's happening. He's in 15th place.
I don't know when the last time Stephen Holcomb was in 15th place. Well, I don't think he knows the last time he was in 15th place.
I bet he does. Rico Peter, decent exit into the labyrinth, but by that stage he'd lost a little too much time. Well, Bernd Hefti of Switzerland leads the race. Thomas Florschutz and Francesco Friedrich of Germany chase. 17 sleds down, and next up, a returning World Cup veteran, Jan Verber of the Czech Republic, with Jan Stoklaska behind him. Did the opening 3 races of the season, and he's only done 1 since, which was Altenburg. A season and career high of 9th place was his finish there.
5:22 start.
A fraction quicker than Rico Peter. And if he can continue with that trend and stay in front of the Swiss, then he will be safely into Heat 2.
Nice exit, nice and straight, 88 kilometers an hour coming into Kreisel. A little low on those blue hashtags.
88.0 is a little slower than the Swiss. He's dropped from 13th now to 16th position behind Stephen Holcomb.
101 kilometers an hour, a tidy straightaway going into corner 10. And a nice exit out coming down into the labyrinth. 122.5 is not enough.
I think he may have gone for a confidence choice on the runners rather than something a little edgy for the cold ice. 18th, he's at the tail of the field, and that leaves him very exposed indeed to those 12 sleds that are still to come. It only needs 3 of those 12 to go quicker, and he will find himself a spectator for Heat 2. Well, that's an extra little bit of padding for Steve Holcomb's hopes of remaining in Heat 2. Holcomb 15th of the 18 sleds, so he needs half the remaining sleds to go quicker than him to bump him out.
A good look at Kreisel here. You can see as he lets the sled get in and on, he steers just a little too hard, brings the sled down almost over top of those blue hashtags, but is able to hold the pressure in his hands and carry it through and have a clean exit. It's not fast, but it's clean and safe. Very high in 10 here. Lets the sled get out and up and hopefully have a slingshot effect coming out into the straightaway, down into the labyrinth.
A first ever World Cup start now for Michel Klingler of Liechtenstein. He's got Thomas Dürr behind him. He has done Europa Cup races. He raced in the World Championship in Lake Placid as well at the end of last season. But World Cup, this is a first for Liechtenstein.
A tidy load, but not the fastest push time. Hopefully carrying a decent velocity into the first 2 corners.
He's a financial controller for a financial institute back home in Liechtenstein, born in Switzerland. And all the team are very much part-timers, ex-soccer players and track and field athletes.
Coming into Kreisel, 87.3 kilometers an hour. Again, a lower line through Kreisel. And with pressure back, getting a hit on the right side of the short wall. Small skid, but is able to correct at 99.6 kilometers, not in the 3 digits.
It's the first not to break 100 kilometers an hour, 120.7, so the speeds are lower all the way down. And the slower push is what is responsible for that. 540 at the start and a 54-second slide.
And we're stopping short again. Let it run.
Yep, he's off the brakes, and they're not going to bother slowing it down anymore. Get to the end of that wall.
Coming into Kreisel again. You can see how that sled drops. It's because the pilot has the most control of the sled in pressure. So once that pressure hits, if he steers too hard, he's going to bring that sled down. He let the pressure come back and brought it down a little too aggressively off the round and brought it back into the short wall for that hit.
19 of our 30 sleds have completed the course here in Igls, Austria. It is Bernd Hefti of Switzerland who leads by a slender margin. Look how close that top 3 is. 20th of 30 sleds at the top of the ice here at Igls, Martin Haven, and last week's winner, Jesse Lumsden, sitting alongside me. And this is Loic Kosterg and Roman Heinrich of France, looking for another top 15 finish to try and get themselves the permission to go to the World Championships from their national sporting body.
Well, a great angle from that low back angle to see how the athletes really drive off that block, use those spikes. 5:29 start. And we talked about it, you do not want to see waves. You do not want to see the sled up and down in these top corners. You're making the track longer for yourself, and that's just going to make your time slower.
18th fastest start. They are still in 18th place. And this young development driver, Loic Kosterg, is the first signs of France returning to bobsledding. The Federation basically shut the program down in the early 2000s.
Important straightaway, and has a small tap, pretty good speed, 102 kilometers an hour.
102.1, this is a good looking run. And he's in 17th position. This could play very well for the French. They need a top 15, and he's in 16th place after the first heat.
He had a very, very tidy run going there. It wasn't until the labyrinth, which can put you into trouble if you get behind in that first corner. If you get into 11 and you get pressure late, it can bring you back. You have to be able to forget about that corner and catch up. Another look at the start here. The spikes made by Adidas digging into the ice and throwing that ice chunks behind them. And coming out of 8. A little bit high on the pressure and a little bit high on the exit there, coming down into the labyrinth.
There's Roma, and at the front is Loic, and tied for 16th with Alexei Stulnev, and they are just 500s behind Stephen Holcomb. Next up, David Kupchik and Martin Navarra. 20 sleds down, so the race is full. Now you have to bump somebody out, and that somebody, at the moment, would be Michael Klingler of Liechtenstein. And certainly from the remaining 10 sleds, including Austria's Jürgen Loacker, you've got to imagine 2 or 3 could make the top 20. At least. 5:29, same as the French sled that we've just seen for David Kupchik.
Aside from the start, these guys definitely have the flashiest speed suits on the circuit. I'm not much of a fashion guru, but
telling me,
you know, they resemble the pajamas, the onesie pajamas with some nice, you know, coloring effects. I would like to see a plaid speed suit someday. A nice plaid, Argyle plaid.
I know who's going to turn up in one of those next year, don't I? Somehow get that past the Canadian board, that would be very good. Nice tidy exit, 101.3. This is not a bad run. This is going to put him firmly into the top 20. Is in 18th place.
Coming through the finish corner, had 123.1.
18th it is, 53.22. He, at the moment, is in the race. And Michael Klingler of Liechtenstein will not get a second heat on his World Cup debut.
Well, you talk to some of the pilots and brakemen, especially in the foreman situation, this braking stretch can be quite terrifying. With snow buildup and because it has an S style to it, and with that corner, people have crashed here. So as smooth and as forgiving as this track is, you saw this sled lift up quite high after that finish corner coming under the roof here.
Bumping all over the place. The most dangerous part of this track is after you've crossed the timing eyes. Jürgen Loacker of Austria with Mate Juhart behind him. Austria's skeleton men both made it into the second heat and had decent runs. Let's see if Jürgen can do that. Just turned 38 from Gotsis here in the Tyrol. Wimmer 2man.
5:33 start. Jürgen chooses to load straight off the pilot bar. Some pilots choose to reach their hand across the pilot bar for more support. That pilot bar is only supported by 1 or 2 pins. So if you're putting 100 kilos down of force directly down onto that bar, we have seen highlights and blooper reels of that bar and that pin snapping down and people having to be quite the acrobat to get into the sled.
Yeah. Not only does your support drop away under you, but of course the potential is to get your fingers trapped between the bar and the cowl as well, with the first corner approaching fast. 101.8, this is not a bad slide from Jürgen Loacker, 21st at the start, and he's up to 18th position. If he knows how to get speed out of here, he better find some shortcuts now. 18th at the line, 53.18 at the moment. They are in. And Jan Verber of the Czech Republic is out. GB1's John Jackson in 20th place is the man in the danger zone.
Well, sleds like Heath Spence, Edwin Van Kalker, the Koreans. I mean, there's still some sleds that have talent, that have the equipment. I think one of our biggest surprises this year is Edwin, how far he's back, and Latvia too, who has been able to put up some very, very good start times and some very good down times.
Well, not a bad looking run. The Austrians don't seem to have any more secrets here. They often used to use different lines to everybody else. There you can see the brakeman Lucas Stigmata on the back of Heath Spence's Aussie sled. And
Heath didn't have the performance he wanted to last week in Königssee. After a good week of training, he put it over, and I know he's looking for some redemption. I don't know, Ranger?
Ranger. I don't know whether, again, it's another in-joke. We're going to have to... we may have to translate that through an Australian into English dictionary. Well, they need to start below 5:30. 5:38 is going to make it very difficult indeed to get into the top 20. The team they're trying to beat started 5:31.
49.5 kilometers at the first start clock was the same as...
Same as same as Holcomb.
Liechtenstein,
and
yeah. So it's going to be tough for him.
Well, Holcomb made it into the race and is still in 15th place. Say that's a good exit from Heath, Spence.
Very good exit. 101.7 kilometers an hour coming down into the labyrinth here.
123.1, this is good. This is nearly as quick as the Austrians. He's in 22nd place. Can he get in? He does not quite make it. 53.40. Lucy Chaffer there with the frog, was it, in her jacket? And Arndt Glass, who's started coaching the Aussies.
Well, even though he's not coming into the second heat, he did have a very tidy run, and he, as a fairly young pilot and as a nation who doesn't have the most funding, the most resources, he needs to build on the small little victories, putting good runs together.
Usually runner choice is pretty simple for Heath because he just uses the runners they have. It doesn't always necessarily suit the track today. It's very cold and very hard ice, and you want the bow, the rock on the bottom of the runners, to have as smaller contact patch as possible to reduce friction. Next up, Edwin van Kalken of the Netherlands with Sybren Jansma behind him, chatting to Edwin in the hotel yesterday. This hamstring that he injured in Whistler was really playing him up the last week. Remember, he took a couple of steps in the two-man, sat in the four-man. He's saying it feels better this week, but of course you've got the World Championships coming. That's 2 weeks of solid action, and then Sochi. You can't afford to be hobbling around, so he's taking no chances with it.
5:31 start, definitely off the pace of what they can do with a healthy Edwin. Sybren on the back is a runner. He can push. He's very lengthy, very long limbs, and very strong.
They've definitely got the potential to make it into the top 20. They did, even with him sitting in the four-man race last week, and in fact in both heats of four-man, with 3 men pushing and Edwin in the sled, they actually outstarted some other healthy four-man crews. So, yeah, if Edwin can shake off this injury somehow, then they've got speed to give away.
Well, you're seeing a run put together here by a pilot who's not normally this far back in the rankings. You know, very tidy, very clean on the exits. What you need, 123 kilometers an hour after a deteriorating track, after how many sleds, 23 sleds we've seen. You know what, he's done a good job to get himself another run.
Absolutely he has, and that was always on the cards. He comes in 400 to the second behind Stephen Holcomb. And that shows you how much of a deficit the start is for this Dutch crew, with Edwin able to follow the sled, but not really committing an awful lot to
Committing or
power.
contributing, exactly.
Yeah. But again, you know, he drives himself out of a hole. They did a very good job at the expense of Great Britain's John Jackson, who is now 21st and out of Heat 2. David Kupchik is in 20th as the young Latvian Oskars Kibamanis comes to the blocks. Now, Oskars, Junior World Championship bronze medalist on this track in December in two-man bobsleigh. So, A, he knows the track recently and well enough to get in amongst the medals, and B, at 19, what's he going to be like in a decade? 19, 10 years more strength, 10 years better driving experience. He's going to be a real threat for medals every time out.
Well, we're back in the teens again, a 5:17 start. We haven't seen that start time or velocity with 50.3 kilometers an hour in a while. And talking with Justin Cripps yesterday after he got back from the Europa Cup, the Latvians also have a Europa Cup team who can start very, very quick. I mean, they're gaining depth, and they're starting to develop and getting the experience for Malbardis, and that's where it's going to translate down.
Well, he's taken over from Ugis Zalims, who's now on the Europa Cup, because this young kid is already Latvia's #2 in only his second season of sliding. Not great speeds, you've got to say, but because of their start, it's taken a while for him to lose the lead or lose his position in the race, but he has, and he's down to 23rd position. That is, without question, the most random run we've seen from him in his brief World Cup career. You know, so much about this, Jesse, is about repetition, is about consistency, and he's just not been around long enough to have that ability yet.
Not yet. Not yet. It's all going to come in time.
But, boy, he's a powerhouse. 5:17. That is a big, strong start from this 19-year-old and his brakeman.
Well, it's 400s off of Lascelles Brown and Rush, and it's right with Spring, right in the mix with Spring and Wright. So I mean, he's in the mix.
Definitely. give him another couple of seasons of driving, he may well be a real contender. Lamin Dean of Great Britain and Ben Simons now in the GB2 crew. Ben on the back handles with Londoner Lamin Dean. Missed shouting out Coach Dave Moy yesterday from the British crew. He celebrated his birthday. I lost the note, so get that in a day late. It was in the post.
It's okay. Belated birthday is just as good as a birthday.
Yeah. Double bubble. Lamin Dean originally from Manchester, former brakeman, been driving now for just 3 years. And in his spare time, he guards the Queen in Buckingham Palace. No, really, he does.
Really?
Yeah. So, you know, he might look good in the bobsleigh outfit, but in his dress uniform, he's properly cutting the mustard. Now, what can he do about getting into this race? 21st at the start. Little waves there in corner 4 and 5.
Waves and taps, not what you want to see at the top here.
24th place, 88 kilometers an hour. It's not bad speed, but he needs a little bit more.
Kept it on the round a little long there. You saw it flop off a touch. But this straightaway is very important. Keeps it clean. 101.5 kilometers an hour is not among the fastest, but it's decent speed.
Well, for a nation that spends so much time historically here at Igls, Great Britain 1 is out of the race, and so is GB2, and that is a very disappointing weekend for the Great Britain men's crew. John Jackson may lose his top 10 ranking as a result, and Lamin Dean and Ben Simons go shooting way up the out ramp.
With the amount of snow that you can see up there, this sled does come to a stop quite quickly. The problem is the brakeman needs to hold on to those brakes, or it will come backwards, and it is downhill for a while, and you do not want to do that. Taking a look at Kreisel coming through the exit, we can see that that right runner is just on the round a little long, and it drops off, and you're going to crunch some ice, and it's going to scrub a little bit of speed. Here's another look, a real tight look at it, and he's just hanging it up there real high. You want to steer that and be progressive on the way out to keep the nose of that sled and sled coming out straight, slingshotting, creating pressure, creating speed.
You can see how bumpy it is there, and that is just rough concrete underneath all of that snow. So that may not have helped their run as much. Well, next up for Korea, Yoonjung Won with Yoongjin Suk on the back of the Korean sled. Yoonjung started his World Cup career in Whistler. This is his first time, indeed, Korean bobsledding's first time in Europe at World Cup level. They have done all their learning on the North American tracks, which give you plenty of variety, from the drivers' tracks like Whistler and Lake Placid to the gliders' tracks of Calgary and Park City. There's lots of variety. And so now they're having to learn, again, every day, just like your teammate Justin Cripps. New day, new track.
Well, they do spend a lot of time in Calgary. Just wonderful guys, a great group of guys, and they love bobsleigh. Very close to coming into the right side of the short wall there, and he was able to get his hands on his D-rings to steer it off just in time. But just great guys, great people, love the sport, want to do well, and with the development of the next 6-7 years, it should be interesting.
Well, you know, they've got an Olympic Games coming up in 2018 in Korea, and that, of course, is what has ignited interest in winter sports to a great degree in the country. And like every other nascent program, you've got to start with zero knowledge, zero talent, zero funding, zero coaching, and it's a long climb to get to the very best who've been doing this 50, 60, 70 years as nations.
121 kilometers an hour is 3 kilometers back on some of the fastest speeds, but he's doing some very, very good things on this run. He's letting it run in some of the right areas and doing it, you know, you can see the fact that there's still a new nation in the sport when the sled does come down the track.
Yeah. So the drivers are learning, the brakemen are learning, the coaches are learning, and, you know, you're absorbing as much as you can from outside, but it is a very small, tight-knit unit. However, they are learning every day and getting better and better.
And take a look at the start here. That right back runner does lift up a little bit. And he has, the brakeman takes some time before he switches his hands over. The idea is to transfer those hands over and through so you're in a good, comfortable, strong position. As we come through the finish line here, I believe that's the finish line. I mean, you shouldn't be pulling the brakes anytime before that, just blowing snow up into the face of the camera.
Well, that's after the finish, but the driver has to shout very quickly. Mikel Cerezy of Belgium, next up. with his brakeman Leno van Dorn. If the Belgian can make it into this field, he'll be a very happy man indeed. 32 years old. Originally a French bobsleigh athlete. He's born and bred in France, lives near Paris.
5:38 get off. Very, very close on that load by that brakeman. He was out of the grooves when he was getting into the sled. He got in smooth enough to not send the sled into a skid.
25th at the start, in 26th position at the moment. We were chatting last week in Koenigsee. He told me that this summer he is going to start building his own sled. He said 50 grand to buy one from Singer or Wimmer, 25 grand maybe to make one yourself. It's got to make sense.
Small tap in that straightaway. 101 kilometers an hour. Coming in through the labyrinth with 122.6. And into the finish corner, needs some height.
53.54 slide. And the Belgians working very closely still with the French teams and the Monaco teams, because of course they're all francophones. But an independent program. Cerizet funds himself. Very determined man. Retired from the sport for 3 years when France basically shut down their program, and then came back, found a new nation to slide with. Long skid there, Jesse, and then the tap on the wall to add insult to injury.
Well, we talk about it. You need to be straight when you need to be straight here. It's the only thing that's going to allow you to keep speed. It's not going to make you faster, but it is going to allow you to keep the speed that you're building up down the track.
Yeah, they're called straights for a reason. There is Mikel. Lino van Dorn on the brakes of the Belgian sled. At the moment, still in 20th place is David Kupczyk of Poland. Now, what maybe can Vuk Radjanovic do about that? Damian Zlatnar in the back of the Serbian sled.
Vuk choosing to drive with gloves. You don't see that too often. A few athletes do. When watching him push, his hands were very over top of that push bar. It is a bit of concern because your hand can slip off quite easily. Also, you're not putting the force into where you need to, which is straight ahead of you.
Well, he suffered a muscle tear in his leg right at the beginning of the season, and is only now just starting to get his strength back. Track completely different here on race day. Cold, crisp, hard and fast, compared to training when it was a little damp and fairly snowy.
Important straightaway. Loses the back end a little bit with 100 kilometers an hour coming into corner 10.
At the moment, still in 26th position off a 25th start. This is going to see him not make the second heat here, I'm afraid. 53.50. So David Kupczyk of Poland survives in 20th place with just our final slider still to go. I've got to say, the chances are that Kupczyk will get a second heat. Yes, and there's a debutante slider coming up next, but
when you take a look at the start here, the hands are very much over top of the push bars, as I was talking about. You want to be really forcing those hands through and forward and in front of you to create that force. And we do have a bit of a skid coming out of the grooves.
But again, you know, a few tiny errors can make a big difference on a track this short. There's no room for mistake, no room to hide.
Very noisy going into Kreisel with those taps. It's gonna kill that speed because, again, we're not dropping. We don't have a huge vertical drop at that point.
Astrid, his wife, pulling the sled out of the way as we get to our World Cup debutants. Drazen Silic is the driver of Croatia 1. Mate Metsilic is his brakeman.
And we have a new competitor for Flash's speed suit.
Former brakeman Silic, and only started driving some 2 years ago. Done a handful of Europa Cup races last year. And this is his World Cup debut.
Nice tidy load by the brakeman. 5:57 get off. Another pilot who's going to be looking for a good tidy run. The expectations may not be as high as some of the people like Floor Schutz, Kuska, Friedrich, Melbardis, but it is important for him to learn, develop, and have small victories along the way. Good runs, good clean runs.
Little late exit there, but he controlled it nicely, didn't break into a skid. Not the slowest speeds we've seen either.
Off a little late, making a huge skid, 99.5 kilometers an hour going into 10.
just a fraction, and we're talking here less than a tenth of a second perhaps with some of these steers that is making the big difference between the line that is good and the line that isn't. And it's that rehearsal and getting those steers right that is going to take the time to learn. When you're on the ice at a race weekend like this, you get 6 trips in training. You've got to combine 2 and 4-man in those 6, and then maybe 1 in the heat 2 if you get through to heat 2. So that's a total of the entire weekend of 10 trips down the track, and then you leave for another year.
And you're not going to be a pro after that. You're not going to not even be close. It takes years of development. It's such a skill to learn. It is so unique. As we can see on the exit here, just hangs it up a little high and it flops off.
And again, tenth of a second different going on to the corner. That would have looked like a genius exit. And those tiny little judgment calls will get rehearsed and refined. Well, the man at the top of the pile is Beat Hefty, last year's race winner here in Igls, Austria. With Thomas Lamparter behind him. Is Lightning going to strike twice? He's got the slenderest of margins, 600ths of a second, cover the top 3 after the first of our 2 heats here in the Austrian Tyrol. And he has still got some tidying up to do. And he'll need to tidy up, because there's no way the others are going to let him escape. They will become after him, all guns blazing. For the moment, Switzerland have the advantage, but it's only half-time. The second half will decide who takes the medal and the European Championship title. Look how close it is. 600s covering the top 3 and a very tight chasing pack behind. Not beyond the bounds of possibility. Melbardis from 4th, Lyndon Rush from 5th, or Zubkov from 6th could take medals here. Plenty of action still to come in Igls, Austria. 20 sleds go through, and the remaining 10, including both from Great Britain, will not get a second heat here in Igls. So stay with us at the Olympia track here just outside the town of Igls when we return with all the action from Heat 2.